Hi, in the last video we have created an application zip file that contains all configurations and projects that we need to define my custom Ivy workflow application. Today we will customize the automated deployment of this application to a remote engine. First of all, we will reuse the deployment already defined in the project that we had, which has all my business processes in it, and I'm going to copy the part of the project build plugin for later reusal, but the execution which tells the plugin how to deploy using HTTP must be removed, as we do not want to deploy single projects anymore, but only full application zip files. Afterwards, I paste the content to my solution app POM file, make it compatible with the structure here, save it. And to make it work in this context, I will obviously change the deploy to engine application, choose whatever you like. I will use my solution. And then we have, in addition to define the source which you want to deploy, here we want something that points to our solution app zip file, but we do not want to specify the whole path to the zip file, since this could change. So we will use Maven expressions like the artifact ID and the version, and add our zip qualifier to it in order to match the name of our solution application zip. So before we run that script, let's examine the target engine. You see here I have a local engine running in demo mode, therefore it only contains the demo portal. Then I can run that Maven build shortcut. And we see that this build succeeded. So let's go back to the browser, refresh it, and you see that a new application is here, the My Solution, and it contains the portal plus my custom project built upon the portal. So all what we expected. Now the engine guide reveals that there are further options to customize the deployment process, and we can do this with a meta file stated here, the deploy.options.yaml. For now I will just copy this template from the guide and put it into my workspace of the solution app project, create a new file, deploy options YAML, and paste the content of this template. To put it into effect, we have to include it in the assembly XML, which defines the content of the zip file we deploy. Now let's shortly inspect the options that we have by adding this meta file. First of all, we have an option to deploy test users. It references the users that you have in the test user configuration of projects. In here we see that we have a test user Bruno and Alex, and by setting deploy test users to true, we can tell the deployment process to add these users of the projects to the running engine. This is pretty cool if you're crafting a showcase for a customer presentation, or if you create an application to run tests against, automated tests of course. Configurations are basically stuff like the web service configurations or REST client configurations that reside within your X and Ivy projects. Now, by setting override to true, we can instruct the deployment to override any configurations that might have already been adjusted on the remote engine. This is pretty cool if you want your application to steer the full deployment process and if you do not expect any changes to be made on the remote engine at all. Also, you could remove deprecated configurations that may already exist on the remote engine by saying that you want to remove unused deployed configs. So last but not least, we will focus on the target section. It defines how process model versions are created on the remote engine. As you may know, if you change the version of a project, let's say I want my solution to be version 2, it will also create a new process model version once you deploy that to a remote engine. So that is pretty cool to roll out new features while not conflicting already running cases. But sometimes, if you want to roll out a bug fix, for instance, this can be a real painful feature for you, because once you have multiple running process model versions on the remote engine, you always have to fix all these versions, maybe just for a simple change on the UI. So what you can do now is to define the target version in the deploy options YAML, and therefore the automated considering of the project version is no longer active. And by strictly defining the target version in this YAML file, we can fine-tune that we want to deploy always to the same version until we really have a breaking change and want to raise that version and deploy it to the new process model. So, yeah, let's see what happens. Let's run that Maven build. And once it's finished, let's see how the solution app was built. We see that there are deploy options YAML was included. And if we go to the engine, we should now be able to run the process. And since we have defined that we want to deploy test user, we should be able to log in as Bruno. And yes, of course, the login was successful. I am now Bruno and can play with this dialog. So you see that with this additional meta file, the deploy options YAML, the full deployment process is under the developer's control.